I'm now joined by Johann, who's really one of the best writers in the UK talking about this subject of ours, climate change, and he's going to tell us some even more bad news.
Okay, well, let's imagine, we all know we need a 40% cut on carbon emissions on 1990 levels.
I need to get a coin flip, though.
To be even with a chance of a 50-50 chance of catastrophic climate change.
Great, would it?
It's not great at all, but it's the best that we're even talking about. So we've already made a massive compromise with human safety. But let's imagine all this fruit represents the 40% cut, right? No one's offering it, so you can chuck all that on the floor, right? No one's offering 40%.
I don't think we should chuck it.
Best offer we've got.
I think handing it to somebody.
Okay, well, hand it nicely. This will go into a delicious salad. Let's imagine the 30%, very best case scenario, we might offer 30%, sounds like. Unfortunately, the whole deal is so riddled with loopholes that even that is mythical.
Okay.
So we start with, firstly, when you hear people offering 30%, what most people assume is that they will domestically cut their emissions by 30%.
So like the UK?
Yeah.
Yep.
Say, for example, you think that we'll shut down a runway, we'll shut down a coal power station, we'll build a lot more wind power. Completely untrue.
More jumpers.
Most of it is paid for by paying for other countries abroad to cut their emissions from rising how they would have. Now, it sounds reasonable at first.
Yeah.
You think, well, the atmosphere doesn't know where it's come from. Unfortunately, a study by Stanford University found that more than half of all the carbon offsetting paid for by companies either doesn't exist, doesn't work, or would have happened anyway. So
and does that include, by the way, the jolly ones when people go flying and they...
Yeah, all rubbish.
Half of them don't exist or don't work.
They don't work, or they would have happened anyway. So, for example, Britain pays for hydroelectric dams in China. Unfortunately, those hydroelectric dams were almost entirely already built. They would have happened whether we came in and paid them or not.
That's a little porky pie, isn't it?
But in return for that, we keep open King's North. So it's an absolute scam, right?
Wow.
Okay, now we then get to the slightly more techie...
We haven't got many emissions cuts left.
Exactly, and we get to the more techie and difficult cuts, but it's worth bearing in mind, you know, I've reported from places like Bangladesh and Darfur and Arctic where these loopholes will mean whether people live or die. So it's worth people staying with this.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one
Even
that's
though
called...
we're using fruit for this.
Even though we're using fruit, the fruit of death.
Yes.
Okay, so imagine the first one is known as hot air.
Yeah.
Okay, the targets that each country were allocated in 1990 before the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
They're based on current emissions. So the Soviet Union was given a pretty big wad. Imagine it's that apple and that apple, right? The Soviet Union then collapsed. All its emissions fell through the floor, and in the Eastern European former Soviet countries. So that stuff was never going to be emitted anyway, right? But they retained it in all the negotiations. They retain it today. Now they're allowed to sell it as a cut offset to rich countries. So you've got a farcical situation, and this isn't a small amount. We're talking about 10 gigatons of hot air. To give you a sense of perspective, if all the developed countries cut their emissions by 40%, that's only 6 gigatons. This is a massive amount.
Russia's hot air is just that?
Yeah, Russia and the former Soviet countries. Yeah, so let's take out that and that.
Oh, shit.
That's what we're left with, right?
That was serious.
Okay, we then get to the fact that the deals aren't even as good as they sound. We take out, first of all, a lot of the counting. Rich countries have forests, obviously places like Canada and New Zealand.
Yeah.
They get credit, quite rightly, for keeping those forests intact, because if they cut them down, they get a load of carbon.
Which is what the other guy was on about.
Yeah, but there's a loophole. The loophole is, in the name of sustainable forestry management, you can cut down, not defined, you can cut down almost your entire forest and it doesn't contribute towards your emissions. So...
Hang on a minute, you can't cut down your forest, that's the whole point.
Yeah, but under the name of sustainable forest management, you can cut down an indefinite number of trees.
So you're like, I'm just doing a bit of tweaking.
Yeah, you can say I'm sustaining the trees by getting rid of them.
Cut them all down.
So let's take out the tangerine.
Okay.
That's what you got. Okay.
That was Canada's forest.
Yeah, that's all the fake forests.
Fake forests.
Gone.
Yeah.
Okay, then you look at the American deal. Now, this is a very clever piece of spin and trickery. The cuts we need are on 1990 levels.
Yeah.
Everything is calculated according to that.
Yeah.
The Americans are offering a pitiful 4% on 1990 levels, even in the best case scenario, even if you include all the loopholes.
Which is so suicide-packed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But trouble is, they obviously that sounds terrible. It's less than a tenth of the cuts that we need.
Yeah.
So they've started saying, well, we'll cut on our 2005 levels.
Yeah.
So it sounds pretty impressive. You say, well, we're offering a big 17% cut on our 2005 levels.
Yeah.
Sounds impressive. So there's fake accounting. So you've got to then take out the fake accounting.
So let me just go over that again. So America, when they say we're going to cut 17%, it's because they're using the wrong baseline year.
Exactly.
And it's actually 5%.
Exactly, less than 5%,
Less than
4%.
So another porky pie.
Exactly.
Okay.
So once you factor in all this, you're left with remember the huge pile of
just a
fruit
tangerine and two bananas.
A farcical situation where the United States, under the current proposals, would not have to cut a single domestic emission until 2026. Okay, that's the cuts that are being offered. It's extraordinary.
So wait, if we get the deal as it is now,
If we get
America
the deal
would
the
be able to
American
expand.
negotiators
Yeah, they
are
want-
arguing
yeah.
for, they would be able to retain the current level where they are by far the highest emitters of warming gases until 2026. Not a single exhaust
not a
pipe.
single
no, nothing.
low energy light bulb.
So you remember the big pile we needed? That's what's on offer at the moment. And that's why so many people are going to be protesting on the streets tomorrow, because what we're being offered here is an insult and an outrage and a terrible gamble with the future of humanity.
And 2 bananas and a tangerine.
Delicious though they are.
Thank you. Thank you very much for explaining that very well. Cheers, Johann.